Hello everyone, and welcome to this tutorial, where we're going to be taking a quick look into line work and outlining your sprites. Now we're just going to head straight into it with doubles and jaggies. Now if you don't know, if I were to draw, let's say, this is perfectly fine as you can see. Now if I were to take Pixel Perfect off, you can see that there's a bunch of kind of corner pieces, as you might call them. Now these are formerly known as either doubles or jaggies. It depends on who you're talking to. But for simplicity's sake, for the rest of this video, I'm going to be calling them doubles. So those are what we're going to be talking about first. As you can see, we can, on one example, we have, in this example, we have with doubles and doubles. And in this one, we have no doubles. Now you can probably see that the right example looks slightly better than the left example. And that's mainly because doubles aren't always the best when it comes to line work. You want to make sure that your lines are crisp and clean and smooth. And when you have doubles, it can sort of muddy the waters a bit. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that doubles are all bad. As you can see in this example, we have one example with no doubles, one example with some doubles and some not, and one example with only doubles. As you can see, the example with no doubles and the example with only doubles each have their own unique styles to them and each look good in their own right. But when you mix them together, it sort of leans into the space of, it doesn't look all that great. So you might want to stick to using either solely one or solely the other. But there's an exception to this, and that's when it comes to when you do need something to have a sharp corner to it. As you can see, with this sword, this on this side is the sword without any doubles at all, trying to make sure that I never use doubles in the example whatsoever. While on this side, you can see that I did add extra pixels that don't necessarily need to be there, but they add something to the sword. As you can see down here, this is one example on the kind of guard hilt thing. I'm not a sword expert, don't ask me what it's actually called. But you can see that I added doubles to each of the corners to make it more look like a square, give it that nice edge shape of a square. And that's one of the examples. Another example is on the cross guard right here. The cross guard on this side looks a little smooth and kind of like rounded out, but on this side I added a couple extra pixels to make it seem more sharp. And just because it has doubles doesn't necessarily mean it looks inherently bad. In fact, I think it looks much better with the doubles. And then finally, at the top here, this looks very rounded, and I don't really want that, especially when you're trying to make something that needs to have a very sharp corner. You want to add that extra double to make it so that it's a very sharp corner, like for example with the sword. So this slide basically just goes to show that normally, when you're just drawing something big, with no corners and you're just trying to make it smooth, try not to have doubles. A quick and easy dirty way to do this on a sprite at least, and I'm pretty sure it has it on Photoshop as well, you can, whenever you are on your pencil tool, you can easily turn on Pixel Perfect, which makes it super easy to draw and automatically gets rid of doubles. Now, sometimes you will get weird examples like this. I tried to make a nice smooth curve and it didn't really turn out the way I wanted. Sometimes you just need to hand draw them. Next, we're going to dive into colors and how colors can affect the sprite that you're outlining in a lot of different ways, actually. The first example here that you can see is just a bunch of top-down boxes that I made, the top being blue, the bottom being red, so that you can see how the different colors of the outlines mix firsthand. As you can see on the left, we have a darker black. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is pure black outline, while on the right, it's a more purplish. As you can see, if we zoom in here, it's a lot more purplish. Now, all of these outlines are not inherently bad. They all work with the sprite, but it really depends on what you're trying to do. Inherently, black outlines make the sprite pop a lot more, make it seem more important, and make the colors in it seem more saturated, even though they're really not. In fact, you could say that these colors look a lot more desaturated while these look a lot more saturated, but if we actually look at them, they are exactly the same. Each one of these is exactly the same. The outline just changes the perception of what the saturation of the colors inside actually are. Now, like I said, this side is a lot black. It makes it pop more, while as you go down the spectrum, darker from darker to lighter, it makes it more desaturated. So, for example, these colors could be used for something in the background to make it seem less important and something that you don't really need to focus on. Well, maybe a darker color, maybe not pure black, but some kind of darker color could be used to mark it as this, hey, this is important. Hey, you should probably look at this, or just something to relevantly have in the foreground if you're using this for just a game or a big art piece. The next example over here is a couple of weapons. A yellow sword, a white and blue sword, and a gray and gold bow. As the top being a lighter outline, a grayish blue outline, and the bottom being a pure black outline. This example is mainly showing you the saturation changes like I was talking before. You can definitely see that the top ones here look a lot more desaturated while the bottoms look a lot more saturated. So these can be used for a background of a maybe blacksmith to show that, hey, these weapons are in the background, you can't really interact with them. While black could be used for items in an inventory. Say I have a golden sword, or a kind of cyber sword, or a cool gold-plated bow. You can definitely see that it's in the inventory with the black outline. Now, something that I want to touch on real quick is that adding, in fact, I want to go back to these squares real quick, is that adding a secondary outline to the already existing outline can be used as well too. It can add even more emphasis to what you're doing. So maybe if I'm selecting this box, then it would have a white outline over it, or maybe I'm selecting this box, so it would have another white outline over it. So that is another thing that you can kind of mess around with. Secondary outlines could also be just a plain and simple, maybe really bright color. So if I use a bright blue, that also works, or maybe a bright red for the blue, just to add some contrast to the other side, or maybe a pink for the blue as well, or, you know, a light green, maybe just to indicate like powers. So like this blue blocks comes with a fire power, and this blue blocks comes with a green grass power. It all depends on you, so secondary outlines are also something that you can work with. And the final thing I want to touch on is this example right here. This is two extremes, if you really, well, not exactly extremes. It's more of one extreme and then one in the middle. This is just the final example I wanted to touch over. This example, as you can see, is purely black. Is a purely black outlined turkey with very saturated colors, as you can see. Although I've already touched on, they're exactly the same colors as this side. This side is a lot more of a grayish, bluish, purplish, but also very light. As you can see in the middle here, you can definitely see that it's not entirely black. If I were to move it down to black, you could definitely see. And then the final thing I want to touch on with this specific thing is that you can also use purely white outlines. This is a very big extreme here. As you can see, we have a purely white outline and a purely black outline. Purely white outlines also work, and like I said, you can use any color you really want, as long as you think that it fits. It's not like doubles and jaggies where now I guess that color doesn't look the best, but one color is correct and one color inherently isn't correct. But this is just because all colors are correct with whatever you want to make the mood or feeling of a certain sprite or thing that you are outlining. Now, mainly you want to try to at least use mostly darker colors, because that's, especially when you're going for a more traditional kind of sprite. But yeah, this example just goes to show that colors can really affect how you're outlining something and what something will look like and feel like to the viewer. So next time you're going to make something, you might want to think about what color you want the outline to be. Alright, finally we're going to take a look into one slightly advanced technique that beginners might not know about. Now, the two that I talked about earlier are some things that all beginners should know, especially when first going into pixel art, especially this slide right here. I see a lot of beginners of pixel art using doubles when they don't necessarily need to, and extra pixels when they don't need to, and it makes their lines look uneven. This is something that all people should know about when it comes to pixel art, that doubles and uneven lines are not always amazing. Now, they can be used to some success, like I was talking about with all the entirely double sprite and the sword, but mainly you shouldn't be using them all that much. But this kind of ties in with the last slide with color, but is also a little bit more advanced technique that some pixel artists will use. And that is using a darker color, yes, a darker version of the outline color or the inner color to make the outline color. I think the simplest example would be this slime right here. As you can see, this is just a normal outline that I picked. I'm pretty sure it's a darker blue. In fact, I can pick with the eyedropper tool. Yep, it's not black. I used a more saturated blue with this one. But you can see here that I used a darker green, and so it's like, okay, you use a darker green for the entire thing. But no, I used a darker green, and then I made a little bit lighter for the parts where the lighter green is showing. So it adds another dimension to the outline and makes the outline look just that little bit more interesting. And over here we have the Kirby. Now this Kirby may look a little bit noisy because of it, and that's because I used anti-aliasing, but I will probably go over anti-aliasing in another video that isn't directly, because it is tied to Linework, but it's something that kind of could deserve a video on its own. But it may look a little bit noisy, but you can see that I used the same technique. I made the outline color just a darker version of the inner color, which makes it adds another, like I said before, another dimension to the sprite. It makes it seem just that little bit more interesting. Now, of course, you can always use a black or a darker color, as I said to make it more pop. And whenever you use this, it makes it seem like it may not even have an outline at all. And if it does, it makes it seem blend in even more. So you could use this for like a background, like I said, or just to make whatever you're outlining or drawing with just that little bit tiny bit more interesting. And finally, with the little Nintendo Switch here, as you can see on this side, I used a all darker version of the outline. Well, on this side, I used a lighter version. Now, this is an example of one that you might not want to use this technique. Mainly because, I mean, at least in my opinion, I feel that the left Nintendo Switch looks much better than the right Nintendo Switch, and that's mainly because I see this as a more kind of cartoony style. And whenever you're using kind of cartoony styles and the other things are not a darker outline, for example, this is a darker outline, but then this uses the same color as the outline, but it's not an outline, so it's not the same color, which makes it look a little bit off. But then when everything that is supposed to be an outline directly is the same color, it makes it seem more kind of stylized and a lot cleaner, crisper, smoother, nicer, any other synonyms that I could use for that. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that this person still looks very nice, and I think that the Kirby and the slime do look nice in their own right, and they're all very interesting styles, and like I said, it makes the sprite more interesting to look at and a little bit have another dimension to it. But this just goes to show that sometimes you will want to use this to add the other dimension, or you may not want to use it to add your own style and spin to things. I will not normally use this, but if done correctly, I think that it can look very, very, very nice. Alright guys, that's it for this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something from it, and I hope that you will use some of these techniques and things in the future. Anyways, I think that's it for me to now. If you have any other tutorial suggestions, such as shading, dithering, or something else along those lines, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you and might even do a tutorial on them. Anyways guys, I think I'm going to be out for now, so see you everyone.